For everyone who has joined us, thank you. This is Dialectical Living's first annual BPD Awareness Month. BPD is one of the most highly stigmatized disorders. The stigma carries real consequences that can sometimes impact the quality of care people diagnosed with BPD receive. BPD Awareness Month was declared in 2007 after the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder organized congressional hearings in the United States. Its impact on individuals and families and the care of these people have been affected. And so we celebrate today, and this will be one of many where we are celebrating the lives of those who've been touched by BPD or emotion dysregulation, or those that carry BPD traits. So we are going to introduce our Dialectical Living's Executive Director, Julie Hayden. Julie is a registered social worker with an extensive background in dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. Julie is passionate about working with individuals with BPD and instills hope and courage in families and loved ones who struggle with emotion dysregulation, helping families find compassion in the chaos. Julie has published 2 books, a skills reminder booklet and a DBT coloring book, which will be available soon on Amazon. She is currently working on a documentary called Life on DBT. Julie is the recent recipient of the OASW Leadership and Innovation Award. Her lived experience and her energy, passion, and sense of fun interaction often helps inspire positive change in others. Join me in welcoming Julie Hayden.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for that lovely welcome. I am equally excited about this webinar. We've been planning for a bit, and we've just been so excited the last few days to bring this forward to everyone. There's been lots of interest, and I'm just so pleased that we're here today and able to do this webinar for you. I just also like to say thank you so much to Isabel. Isabel is our social media person, and she's pretty special, and her Instagram posts are amazing. So if you're not following us on Instagram, Isabel is doing such a great job with a lot of the posts there. Isabel will also be doing her placement with us come September. So we're pleased that she's going to be joining us to do some real group facilitation. And we're just so pleased to have Isabel. Thank you so much, Isabel, for helping out with this webinar. Without you, we could not have done it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a couple things before we introduce our amazing musician for the webinar. I just wanted to say that, and Isabel had touched on this about stigma. So we really need to have more of these types of events to do our part to reduce stigma. You know, thank you to everyone for being here, as this means that you are passionate about just that, about reducing stigma around BPD. We like to call BPD emotion dysregulation, likely for the reason that there are stigma, and it's also BPD month, so we will be referring to it likely a little bit interchangeably. We tend to call it emotion dysregulation or challenges regulating emotions. There's some movement to get the name changed actually to emotion regulation disorder, which I think fits just that much better. So if ever you see a petition coming around to change this name, I know there was one at some point, would be a good thing to sign. So we have an exciting lineup of speakers and musicians, and I'm so very proud of all the speakers for coming forward to share your experiences, your strength, and your hope. When people see others, managing with BPD and emotion dysregulation, it gives everyone hope. And thank you so much for everyone being here and offering us hope. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Amanda Martinez. Amanda Martinez is a Canadian-based singer-songwriter whose music blends her unique Mexican and South African roots with flamenco soul. She has released 4 albums: Sola 2006, Amor 2009, Mañana 2013, and her upcoming recording Libre Free 2020. That is her most eclectic creation to date. Her songs have been selected for 4 Puta Mayo World Music Collections, Bossa Nova Around the World, Latin Dreamland, Cafe Latino, and Mexico. Career highlights include headlining the Blue Note Jazz Club in New York City, the FIFA World Cup in South Africa, and the Pan American Games in Mexico and in Canada. Amanda's recordings have reached the top 10 on iTunes World Music and Latin Music charts, and she has been nominated multiple times as Latin Jazz Artist of the Year and won Best World Music Artist for her debut recording. Since COVID, Amanda feels fortunate to have been able to develop her acting career, landing roles in Hallmark's 2 for the Win, The Hot Zone, and guest starring on Private Eyes. She is currently voicing 2 recurring animation roles that will come out in 2022 and 2023. Now we'll bring to you Amanda. And Drew. Drew is also with us. We're so pleased to have Amanda's partner, Drew. He's going to be helping out. And thank you so much, Drew, for being with us.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Julie. Thank you so much for the invitation. We are going to perform a song for you that is called Look to the Rainbow. Not one that I wrote, but one that I just love listening to growing up. And to me, it's kind of like an adult lullaby that is very soothing to the soul for adults and kids alike. So this is Look to the Rainbow. On the day I was born, said my father, said he, I've an elegant legacy waiting for thee. It's a rhyme for your lips, a song for your heart, to sing whenever the world falls apart. Look up, look to the rainbow, follow it over the hills and the sea. Look up, look to the rainbow, follow the fellow who follows a dream. So I bundle my heart and I roam the world free, to the east with the lark, to the west with the sea. And I searched all the world, I scanned all the skies, and found it at last in my own true love's eyes. Look up, look to the rainbow, follow it over the hills and the sea. Look up, look to the rainbow, follow the fellow, follow the fellow, follow the fellow who follows a dream. Who follows a dream. I wanted to say a few words about how I got involved with DBT and meeting Julie, who I'm very inspired by, and I think the work that she does is really amazing. Lately, oh, someone's saying that they can't hear anything. Is it just them? Can everybody else hear? I mean, I can hear from my end. So hopefully we're okay with sound.
I can hear you. I can
Yeah,
hear
Okay,
you.
great.
We can
We're
hear.
good. We're good.
Okay, good. What I was going to say is that I wanted to just first of all say thank you to everybody that is attending today, because I think it takes a lot of courage, whether you have a diagnosis of BPD, whether you have a family member that might have a diagnosis, or you're just you're curious about DBT skills as I was. I think it takes a lot of courage to be here. And I'll tell you why. In our society, I think that physical health is something that we all kind of take for granted. We know that if we want to be physically fit, we have to actively do something every day. We can't just, like, chances are if we don't get fresh air, or we don't eat healthy food, or we don't do any kind of exercise, eventually it's going to catch up with us, right? We don't have to have a physical illness such as cancer or diabetes or whatever for us to do something. We all kind of know that. And yet in our society, I think when we talk about the word mental health, we associate that with mental illness, which has a lot of stigma around it. And what's really interesting is that I said to Julie before she introduced me, I said, you know, I really hope you're not going to be labeling me as having BPD, because that's not my diagnosis. And then I realized that that's really insulting to people that do have that diagnosis. And it kind of goes hand in hand with that idea that even it took me a lot of years to even investigate DBT, because I had heard that it was associated with this BPD diagnosis, which to me sounded really scary. And I thought, well, I don't know, like, are these people crazy? Like, who am I going to be in this workshop with? And yet it's something that was really life-changing for me. And when I got to know everybody in the class, you know, some people were there because they were parents of people that have BPD, others had it themselves, others had a partner with it. And the bottom line is that what I think is really interesting is that I remember taking a workshop on mental health, and they talked about our mind being like a garden. And unless we actively take out the weeds, weeds are going to grow. We have to actually do something for mental fitness. And yet in our society, I think we feel like either we have a mental illness and we have to be taking a DBT course or go into a mental institution, or we're fine. But actually, all of us, what makes us human beings is we all have feelings. I think every single one of us can relate to having feelings, and that at different times of our life, those feelings can come on a lot more strongly. Like if we're experiencing grief, or we've just had a really big disappointment, or we're super excited, those feelings come and go in waves. And when we're talking about BPD, a lot of time we're talking about emotional deregulation, which we can all relate to at different times. I've got kids. One of them might have a specific diagnosis, another one might not. And yet their reaction to things are learned behaviors. And I think very few of us have had models as parents that can model healthy regulation of feelings, because we're just doing what we handle things the way our parents handled things, and then we kind of take it on. So bottom line is that the way of dealing with our feelings, we're driven every day by our feelings towards comfort, which is why we reach for those sugary snacks to calm ourselves down when we're feeling stressed out, or safety. And so when we are given a diagnosis, or we're facing something where our emotions are crazy, we don't necessarily have the tools on how to deal with those big emotions. They're not taught in school, unfortunately. They're generally not taught by our families. We kind of just do what our parents did, you know, we yell if we yell or whatever. And I think what Julie is teaching with DBT is a really important life skill. So although you may not have the diagnosis yourself, or maybe you do, I think every single human being on this planet could use those skills for everyday living. And that's why I think it is so important. And I've been telling Julie that I hope that she'll make those skills available for kids, and rather than we wait until we're adults or we're faced with a crisis, and then we have to, by emergency, deal with that. So I just want to like commend you, Julie, for the amazing hard work that you're doing and spreading this important education, and for all of you here joining to learn more about it.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And a few things you said I would love to touch on. So many great insights. And it is true, you know, BPD, and you mentioned it so well, the idea that there are myths about BPD. And I'm actually working on a short video on what are the myths. And I've heard so many of them, and they make me cringe. And many of them actually come from healthcare practitioners who don't really know the diagnosis and may not diagnose it, or may not know that there's treatment. And of course, as you'd mentioned, that DBT is good for everyone. And of course, now we know that it was originally developed for people by Marsha Linehan for BPD. And now there's all kinds of studies being done that we know it's good for addiction, it's good for all kinds of other things, ADHD. We have people who come and take the DBT course who have a wide range of things. And we tend not to focus too much on labels, although for, you know, the world is a very medical sort of environment, and we all know, and in order to get treatment within the medical model, we need to have a diagnosis. And so I think it's really great that you mentioned the idea also that we're on a continuum, right? So it's not about being sick or not sick. It's about landing on a continuum where maybe at some point in your life, you're at the far end and you feel great and things are going really well. And then something happens, a breakup in a relationship or death of a parent. And of course, this can really impact our mental health. And of course, it can exacerbate if someone has a mental health diagnosis, maybe more so than a person who might not. However, it still exists that we move back and forth. So I believe actually that everyone has mental health challenges, is my belief. And we just sort of exist at any point on this line at any given time, given, you know, what might be going on in our lives. And you've mentioned schools, and I'm just really excited you mentioned that. I was doing a talk last February with Toronto Catholic District School Board, and they're looking to bring DBT into schools. And we know that DBT is in high schools in the States. And so some movement here in Canada to get DBT taught in schools, I think, you know, as a proactive would save so much money in healthcare costs, so much, you know, recognizing that sort of the Band-Aid fixes are expensive. And, you know, aside from that, and what I feel is more important is that people will, you know, have wellness earlier in their lives, especially those who might be more sensitive. And of course, we know persons with BPD or emotion dysregulation have more sensitivities. And for those of us who do, there's great gifts there. And I'd love to talk about the gifts for those who are more sensitive, who have BPD or emotion regulation. Just to name a few, we know that there's greater empathy. We know that oftentimes people are in the helping fields who have more sensitivities, able to read emotions in others more readily, you know, creative and resourceful and often charismatic. And so again, when I hear the myths, I think of all the amazing positive things and the gifts that people have to offer the world who are sensitive. And so I just want to make sure we've labeled this, you know, celebrating strength, and I know there's a lot of strength in the room and the speakers and in everyone here who's attending, and everyone who you're going to see today on the screen. Thank you so much, Amanda. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, I know actually Drew also took your course, and I was just going to give him an opportunity just to say a couple words, but I did want to just mention that that I do think that for mental health, we are talking about proactive things that you can do every day, and that we don't leave it until we have a crisis. Like, to me, it's like, oh, we need to be doing those things every day. And I even over workshops, I remember talking about like having a box so that when you feel bad, you open that box and then you give yourself these self-care things. But I think don't wait until you feel really bad, because when you feel that bad, you don't want to open the box. I think that we need to open that little box of self-care every single day, the same way that we just take care of our bodies every day. We don't wait until we've hurt ourselves. But did you just have a quick thing to say? Is that okay, Julie, that Drew just was
I would love for Drew. I feel like I didn't have a beautiful bio for Drew. Sorry, Drew. I would love for you to do a little introduction so we'd know more about you. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll just say that Drew is an award-winning bassist and composer. He is the bassist in my band and also with the Sultans of String. He's worked with Chantal Kraviazik, so he's hundreds of albums. But he's a dad too. He's my husband and the dad to our 3 children, and he took the course as well.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And I just want to tie in with what Amanda was saying, and hello to everyone out there. And I was very fortunate to have taken Julie's course, and a thought came up that I thought I would like to mention is my brother got me a book a long time ago on finances. It's called The Wealthy Barber. And there's an expression there that I really kind of stuck with me, which was pay yourself first regarding finances, and I should say, something that Amanda said about taking time every day to take care of yourself and pay yourself first and give yourself time, be compassionate with yourself. And I can't tell you what a gift it was to take Julie's course. And I paid myself first. And I think it was once every Tuesday night for several weeks I went. And I tell you, it was a really incredible experience. And I learned so much. And it is very true what Amanda says, that we need to take time out, just as we exercise our bodies, to exercise our minds and to be kind and compassionate with ourselves. And another thing that I learned in DBT was the expression, I'm doing my best and I can do better. And that's always stuck with me. So thank you, Julie, for leading the course and for all of your teachings.
Thank you. And thank you to Marcia Lanahan, who created DBT. We wouldn't be here without her. And I love that you mentioned when you said and. I was really proud of you there. Of course, at DBT, we talk about removing the word but, and you clearly thought, oh, wait a second, DBT and. Very good. You remember things. You have a good memory. And also, Amanda, the distress tolerance box that you're speaking of, I totally agree. If we have these boxes on our kitchen table so that we remember that we do have skills and things that can help us in moments before we get to the point where we're, sort of over the edge and in a place of intense, emotion dysregulation.
I'll just add one more thing that I think is really, really important. And that is the judgment that we put on ourselves and others. And I think that's something that, even the behavior we might be dealing with in someone else or in ourselves, like the judgment around it, that gets us into more trouble than actually what's actually going on. And anyway, but I'm sure you'll discuss that too when you talk about the actual skills, but that was a big takeaway for me.
Judgments. I remember the first time I took DBT many years ago, we carried around a clicker, which kind of ages me. I'm sure there's an app now to count all the judgments we have in a day, and it'd be amazing how many that we have. And I believe actually that judgments, especially the ones that make us uncomfortable and maybe sort of hurt others, I think sort of take healthy years off our life, because I really believe that our judgments can make or not having judgments can make a big difference in our lives. That's a very good comment. Thank you. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie.
Okay, so I would love to introduce to you our first speaker. We have Darcy. Darcy is a trauma survivor and author of Healing Trauma, DLP. She is a proud mother of a 17-year-old daughter. She finds DBT skills very helpful to navigate complex PTSD. Join me in welcoming Darcy. Hi, Darcy.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Great.
We see you. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the privilege to speak today. It really is a privilege, because to share healing and what works for me, I just love sharing that. And DBT skills has definitely worked for me. So I'm going to kind of give a brief overview of the skills that I use for PTSD. And first of all, mindfulness. I think mindfulness to calm one down is super helpful. Distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal skills. So let me first explain what it's like to have PTSD for me. So I have a window of tolerance. Most people have a window of tolerance around there. For me, it's about this wide. So I can go straight into hypervigilance, which is up here, in a matter of seconds because of the childhood trauma that I experienced. However, using DBT skills has been super helpful. So I'm going to explain distress tolerance. So when I'm in the hypervigilance, when I'm outside, what do? Tip skills. What are tip skills? It's changing your body chemistry. How? Ice cube on a forehead. Going to get an ice cube out of the freezer. If you don't have ice cubes, splash cold water on your forehead. Just that cold water shakes everything up. Intense exercise. So let's say I'm in hypervigilance and I just want to get really frustrated, start jumping up and down, jumping jacks. That really helps. Go for a walk. Another idea is paced breathing. This is where the mindfulness comes in and the spiral staircase. So I visualize I'm at the top of the staircase and I'm taking 4 breaths in, holding for 4, and then 4 breaths out while I'm using mindfulness to visualize I'm coming down that staircase. So that's what happens for me with PTSD when I'm outside of that window of tolerance. Now, there's other skills that I really, really like, which is turning the mind, radical acceptance. So what is that? It's observing your willfulness. So let's say you're in the lineup for Tim Hortons and there's like 40 cars and you want to get through there and it's a big lineup and no one's moving. So you notice that I'm getting really frustrated right now. I want to go first. I have something to do. I notice it. Then you make an inner commitment. And then you plan for radical acceptance. So it's almost like you do it on purpose, and that's where turning the mind comes in. So it's like, instead of getting frustrated right now that it's taking forever, I'm going to turn this mind, radically accept. It doesn't mean that I like it, but I'm going to radically accept, and that reduces suffering. Half smile and willing hands. That is such a key for me, especially if I'm talking to someone that's frustrating me. And I really want to say what I'd really like to say, but I can't. So I think about, okay, half smile, willing hands. It literally changes the frontal lobes because with PTSD, it goes straight to the amygdala. It's either fight or flight. For me, it's fight. I'm a fighter. So having those skills at hand in my toolbox is super helpful, and it just changes your physiology in your body so you can handle the situation. Now I'm going to move on to emotional regulation. So emotional regulation, what I really like is the dialectical component. Two things are opposite but true, and it's an opportunity to balance both sides. So it's kind of like making lemons out of lemonade. So you allow, and it allows connection and it embraces change. So an example would be, I am tough and I'm gentle. So it's having two opposing beliefs. It could be it's sunny outside, but it's cold. There's so many ways to challenge yourself to be dialectical. Another way for emotional regulation is to name the emotion. So again, I go into fight mode. So noticing that I'm getting angry, noticing that I'm getting frustrated, noticing that I want to fight with that person. So stop, spiral staircase. What are the feelings I'm feeling? Frustrated, angry, tired, annoyed. So as soon as I say that in my mind, if you want to tame it, you got to name it. So I find that super helpful. Another thing about TBT is self-validation. And it's not only good to validate the other person, absolutely, and that comes in with interpersonal skills, but also self-validation. Because when you can find the kernel of truth of a situation, that's when you get self-respect. And oftentimes, when you're in a situation that's frustrating, having that ability to validate yourself and say, hey, I'm really doing the best I can here. Hey, I think other people are doing the best that they can as well. It just really helps bridge that communication. Checking the facts. And sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Check the facts is so important when you're in a situation. So putting that mental note, because sometimes when the emotions are high, outside of that window of tolerance, I'm going in fight mode. Let's check the facts. What's really going on here? This person said this. The key issue is this. We're both trying to get to this point. Let's check the facts. Opposite action. I love opposite action. So that is like, for example, again, PTSD, I go in the fight mode. So what is the opposite of going into the fight mode? Well, it's being gentle, it's being soft, it's having a sense of humor. So I find that really helpful, that skill. So I think I've done that. So I'm going to briefly talk about interpersonal skills, and then I'll share my book, which is called Healing Trauma Memoirs. So writing this book, and you can buy it online as an ebook. It's super cheap, and it's DLP. So there's my little picture there. So it's all about healing from trauma, and it's a book full of poetry and prose and artwork. So I did a lot of art therapy to heal. I had severe childhood trauma, won't go in the details, but doing art therapy at the same time doing DBT skills, it was so healing for me because the art therapy was the right side of the brain, which is where the trauma gets stored. And then DBT is the left side of the brain. So it's creating that neuroplasticity that really helped me get from A to B, C, and just kept on healing and moving forward and feeling really good about myself. I had a really good review from a judge because I'm in the legal world. And long story short, the review that he gave me, I can't even tell you what it meant because he said, I went into this woman's soul who experienced this trauma. And from hearing briefly her story about how she healed was so healing for me. And he said, I didn't even have trauma. So that was really amazing. So I'm going to go into interpersonal. Sorry to jump around. So interpersonal skills is dear man, give, and fast. So those three are really super helpful to have in your back pocket when you're dealing with other people, especially in the legal world where I work. So, you know, I have no issue with dear man, which is describe what you want, express your feelings or your opinions, assert what you want, and then reinforce it. And then man stands for be mindful. How's the other person reacting? Be confident and negotiate. No problem. But what I have a hard time with is give skills. And give is be gentle, be interested, validate, easy manner. So when I want something and I'm in that fight mode, I just want it, want it, want it. But taking a step backwards and saying, let's use the give skills. Because if you give, sometimes you receive. So let's be gentle. Let's be really interested. That person has an opposing view. You think ABC is correct, but they're at XYZ. So how can we bring the parties together? By being interested in their point of view, validating their point of view, and having an easy manner about it. And I'm telling you, learning these skills in DBT, it's instrumental to get to that point of negotiation. It's so helpful. And then there's fast, which is your own self-respect. Be fair, no apologies, stick to your values, and be truthful. So that one I don't have an issue with either. It's just the give one. So bringing that in again. So I think I'm pretty well done. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm pretty quick at my synopsis. I hope that everyone heard it and it was helpful. Thank you for letting me share.
Darcy, I would love to know a few things. I'm so happy you went through all of those 4 quadrants of skills, and it's like it's so, you know, so clear that you really have done your work and you know done DBT and you're using it. It's like you're doing it. You're not just talking the talk. You know, you're walking the walk and really using these skills. And I'm just so proud of you and impressed that you're using them and you're able to explain how. I'd love to know more about the book that you wrote. It sounds like, you know, as well as, you know, we talk about PTSD, I know a lot of people struggle with PTSD who have BPD. There's actually some talk out in the medical field where that PTSD is actually a form of BPD, or BPD is a form of PTSD. And of course, we know that when we're more sensitive, so when we tend to be more sensitive, that trauma comes more easily. So in other words, we talk about big T trauma and small T trauma. And many of us have had probably everyone at some level had small T trauma. And some of us have had big T trauma. And it is certainly for sure that those of us who are more sensitive experience trauma in a much bigger way. So I think that it's important to recognize that trauma can be harder for people who are more sensitive than they might be for the what are we saying now, neurotypical? I'm not sure I like that word so much, but for the average person who may not experience the kind of sensitivity that those with BPD or emotion regulation have.
Yeah, I think being sensitive is a real gift. I mean, I was born sensitive. I could feel things that other people didn't feel, like goosebumps when I hear someone playing the harp. And also really understand what a person's going through and feel their emotions. So I was born with high empathy and high sensitivity, 100%. And I find with complex PTSD, it's almost like I have a built-in antenna, because that comes with the trauma of there's danger coming. So because I grew up in a very unsafe environment, I have a built-in antenna, plus I'm a super sensitive person. So having the combination of both, but it's a real gift too, because being born sensitive, I mean, I don't know, I laugh and my laugh is so hearty and I feel it right in my belly. And you know, I'm passionate, like especially when I'm representing a client or, you know, talking about something I'm passionate about, like DBT, for example. It's so there's a lot of good qualities being a sensitive person. My daughter was born sensitive. Thankfully, she didn't have trauma and she has such a wonderful life. So yeah, it's good being sensitive. And they say that with DBT, some people are just born sensitive and it's good skills to have for those sensitive people. So absolutely. But yeah, I know that when I was diagnosed, they explained that with complex PTSD, it's all about getting outside of that window of tolerance, and then the emotional dysregulation happens for me. And it's so true, because when I'm in that window of tolerance, I'm super calm. And then when I'm outside, I'm like, whoa, where's my cheat sheet? It's right here. But writing the book has been super helpful. That has been super healing. And, you know, it just talks about, you know, my journey and what I had to go through. And all these different poems that brought me. For example, there's, I'll just do a quick, I don't know how much time I have left, but I do a quick introduction, and it's only a few pages because I don't focus on the trauma. History about different therapies I've gone through, a relationship that I had, which really, like sometimes when we attract someone, that person can sometimes be like our parents, and then working out that, because unfortunately my mother was a malignant narcissist and my father was a closet narcissist. So having a relationship really, and then writing about it really healed a lot. And then void. So we all have a void, and some voids are deeper than others. For people that have had trauma, some people have a deeper void, not all, that have experienced trauma. For me, yes. So I wrote this one piece about pathway to enlightenment, and it was all about feeling the void and going into that tunnel, the dark night, if you may. And then healing and wisdom, all the poetry of the healing and wisdom. And whenever I get down, and because I swear to you, when I wrote this book, I don't even feel like I wrote it. I wrote it in like 3 days. It just all came out after this wonderful art therapy program I did. It just all came out. And so I read the book just to ground me again. So I'm like, the best customer is probably me, because I'm reading it over and over again. So yeah, I mean, All the proceeds I donate. I've had some great feedback on it. You know, people that were not in a good place and read it and said, oh my gosh, I can't tell you what that book did for me. So yeah, I love sharing it for anyone that might get a blessing out of it. And that's about it. Yeah, it's been a real blessing. And when you come out of trauma and you realize that your trauma has been a blessing because you can help others, that's where I'm at right now. Like I still struggle and I still use my DBT skills because PTSD is always there with that window of tolerance, neuroplasticity, and it does widen. So I do things to widen it. Like I do hot tubs, I do massages, I do meditation, because that all helps with that. But yeah, it's always there. It's never 100% healed, and you just find ways around it. And then you can start really enjoying your life. And that's where I'm at now.
That's amazing, Darcy. Thank you so much. And I feel inspired to want to read your book.
Thank you.
It sounds really awesome. And 3 days, oh my goodness, I'm really impressed with that.
Yeah, mind the grammar. I did it. I have a page that says, this is not perfect. And so what? Because I've been such a perfectionist. So it was nice to write something and not worry about commas and all of that. Yeah.
Free flowing. Love it.
And thank you so much, Julie, for what you do. You're amazing inspiration as well. Thank you.
No, thank you. That makes my day. Thank you so much, Darcy.
So Darcy, oh, sorry,
Yes.
Darcy, we have a question from one of our attendees. So thank
Absolutely.
you. Yeah, thank you, Namira, for your question. And it is, out of all the skills, what would you say is the most useful skill you have used when experiencing hyperarousal when you were triggered? I need something to go to fast when I'm triggered.
The mindfulness, the spiral staircase, like, because I've had situations where I'm ready to start screaming because I'm very expressive. Some people hold it inside. For me, it's out, but that's not good for people around me. So I visualize the spiral staircase, and I take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, and then out for 4. And then I increase it to 5, and then 6, and then 7. And by the time I get to 7 and I do that twice, I'm back in the window. So it takes about 10-15 minutes, but having that in my toolkit, visualizing the spiral staircase. So at the beginning, I'm right at the top, but then I'm visualizing I'm coming down that staircase. And that is what's super helpful for me. Great question. Thank you. And the ice cube too.
Thank you, Darcy.
Any more questions? Do we have any more questions for Darcy?
No, that's it. Thank you so much, Darcy.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Darcy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would love to introduce to our second speaker. His name is Blake. And Blake's lived experience with emotion dysregulation started in the year 2000. When he completed 12 weeks of the DBT program, he was able to confidently say that he could manage and regulate his emotions. It has given him the skills to help himself as well as to support and inspire others with emotional dysregulation and addictions. He is living proof that DBT works. And I'd like to say that Blake came, I think, how many times did you do the DBT program? Maybe 3?
5. 5 times.
5 times. Good for you. Blake was, we'd love to have him back. Gave us great insight and great examples. And so Blake is very well versed in DBT, having come and done it with us several times. So I understand that you're going to be speaking today. I have some questions. So I understand that there's been some problems with relationships that you wanted to talk about in relation to maybe how you may have overcome some of those issues using DBT skills. And of course, you can also speak to, I'm so proud of you that you've gone many, many years, and we'd love to hear how many years that you've been clean. Being able to have that many years is really awesome. So we'd love to hear about that as well.
Okay. Well, I always struggle with relationships. I find I got tied up with narcissist people sometimes, and they do nice things for me, and then and then it would never like it would be end sort of like being used, and so I kind of moved on with that, being careful who my friends are. So actually, I'm actually 60 today. And
60. Hey, happy birthday.
so in another month, it'll be 7 years without drinking. So it took me 14 and a half years of going to a lot of meetings to finally stay sober, because I could, I think the borderline thing is a black and white thinking. So I struggled staying sober. Well, I'm not affiliated with any group or organization. This is just my opinion. So this is my experience, strength, and hope that especially younger people don't have to go through what I went through and learn earlier in life. When I was young, I was different. People, they were a lot more prejudiced sort of thing back then. I think now that it's a lot more awareness about mental health and emotional health as well. So I had 2 car accidents when I was 19, like high speed ones. So I had a lot of problems with post-traumatic stress and controlling my emotions, especially. Back then though, like that was in 1980, there really wasn't much help for anybody. Just kind of, I didn't see any psychologists or anything like that. So, so basically I struggled through my life. In my 20s, I played a lot of pool, which actually, it actually helps regulate my emotions because I'm using math. And when I use math, I start using the logical part of my brain so that the emotional turmoil goes away. So anyway, to fast track it anyway, I was in a car accident in 2000. So all of the post-traumatic stress of the not sleeping, having nightmares, becoming to have a drinking problem, all that stuff just repeated itself all over again. This time I saw a lot of psychologists. They never did say, like for 5 years, no one ever did diagnose me with a borderline personality disorder. I had a lot of struggles, and I did manage to keep my business going. It was really hard. So so then I started going to like a lot of group meetings. I attended AA, Al-Anon. I started in the mental health system, so I went to PST meetings, trauma, depression, anxiety, even some borderline meetings. And that really helped a lot. And I think by sharing as well, it actually reinforces, what I'm trying to do. So
I've got here, Blake. I'm wondering, you started touching on it. Sort of what you've mentioned, the car accident and PTSD and having issues around sleeping, and you also talked about how you went 5 years and didn't have a diagnosis of BPD. Do you remember when you did get that diagnosis and what that felt like?
Well, actually, I was a psychiatrist, and he told me I had that and kind of explained to it. But I'd actually seen another psychiatrist, and she, when I told her that she had what I had, and then she explained what it was. Like it's high intelligence. Like most people have over 130 IQ, like 80%, and 80% of them have addiction problems. And so like AA is made up of 65% borderline people. I can't regulate my emotions by drinking, even though it seems like I could. So I lost my mother last year, but before that I got a phone call that she wasn't going to make it through the night. So I had a post-traumatic stress episode. So basically I blacked out for 12 hours and I lost my car keys and I couldn't find them. So I went to see my doctor and he really doesn't know what it was, but I describe it as like the first time if you remember the first time you got really, really drunk and you're in that daze for a couple of days and stuff like that. I felt like dazed a lot. But the one thing was I don't drink anymore. And I think drinking would have kept that post-traumatic stress symptoms going because they're very similar. So after a couple of days, I felt fine. So he referred me to a psychiatrist, and he really didn't know much about borderline personality disorders. So I was dealing with Dr. Judy Freud, who is she's on YouTube. She has a call-in show every Thursday night at 11 o'clock. And she has what she calls a mind map. So basically the first panel is identifying childhood wounds. So there's abandonment, neglect, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. They're the really only 5 abuses that there are. So I think with the borderline, I think it's trauma and abandonment that brought that emotional instability to me. So basically, I identified the childhood wounds and then how they affected me. And then panel 3 was negative core beliefs. And I think that's what I found is that is the key, I think, to me is with this borderline problem is that I constantly have to get myself out of some of the beliefs that are sort of really deep inside sort of thing. So basically there's 9 types of intelligence, and my biggest problem was I really didn't know about myself. I didn't have interpersonal relationships with myself, and I didn't have interpersonal relationships with other people. And DBT actually teaches all these 3 intelligences, where the other stuff is good, like knowing about nature, musical and logical and all that kind of stuff. But that was the biggest problem I had was, I really, and like, why do I feel like this, stuff like that. And then, when I drive, like if I have driving anxiety, if I say this tree is 50 feet high and this, this bridge is 1.5 miles away or something like that, well, the mathematical part of my brain takes over and the anxiety subsides. So I really don't, that's, so I think the same thing is when, if I feel anxious, you do like puzzles, or you, like I build stuff and stuff like that. It seems to take the anxiety. The logical mind, I think, cancels out the emotional mind, and the emotional mind has much more power than canceling out the logical mind. It's great. It's kind of a balance, eh?
And that sounds like, Blake, we're talking about wise mind, and I love how you've explained it. The idea that, rational mind kind of takes over, and that you can think more clearly and you feel better when you're, not in emotion mind and more in the middle place, wise mind. And Blake, for those of you who know DBT, you certainly know what Blake is speaking to. And for those of you who are just learning DBT, the concept that wise mind is integration between those 2 minds. And also, Blake, I just want to say I'm, very sorry. Losing a parent has got to be one of the most hardest things that we go through. And of course, for those of us who struggle with emotion dysregulation, it's just that much harder. And I'm so proud of you. I remember that time and you telling me about your mom last year. And I was just so proud of you that you were able to, not go back to your substance of choice, right? Even though you'd experienced this blackout, which I'm sure was a extreme response to stress in the form of dissociation. So I just wanted to say that I'm just very proud of you that you didn't relapse. You went through this difficult time, and you're talking about using skills, which is just gives everyone a lot of hope and inspiration. I'm sure many of us are shaking their heads right now, feeling the inspiration and hope that you've talked about around using skills as opposed to substances, which of course you mentioned make PTSD and maybe other things worse.
Yes. And
I'm wondering, you've mentioned here that your experience seeking treatment for BPD. Now you've touched on this a little bit. I wonder if there's anything else that you wanted to add around what your experience has been seeking treatment, whether or not there's been any stigma, whether or not there's been long wait lists, whether or not, you've had therapists who maybe don't understand BPD, which is often can be the case. What has been your experience?
Well, the first psychiatrist I said, he said I was a very intelligent man, but I wasn't quite, a very creative man, but I wasn't right in the head.
Did he actually say that? Or should
Yeah.
he? Okay. Oh my. Okay.
So I had stopped drinking for like 3 months and went to see him, and basically he just said, you're all better now. Just you can go back and see your doctor, which didn't. But I find psychologists, because I saw a lot of psychologists after the car accident. I saw quite five of the top ones apparently, and yeah, it was. I joined the mental health system, and first I was just seeing a counselor, and we were doing that. So yeah, I went to a lot of meetings, and then I heard about DVT, but I live in the Niagara region, and there was a waiting list of like a year and a half. Back that was about 5 or 6 years ago. So I heard about you guys, so I got some money together and I came down and started, and that really changed my life a lot. Even after the first 12 weeks, everybody noticed that I was functioning a lot better. And I was more aware and everything. It helped a lot, because I think it just sort of put everything together for me. All the sort of skills I needed to function a lot better. But I think now though, there's a lot of stuff online now. Like you guys have stuff online, so it's a lot easier for people to find that. There wasn't the internet back in 2000 where I could find out any information. So there really wasn't much talk about a borderline personality disorder, not till I think it was maybe about 8 years ago that I found there was a lot more stuff going on YouTube and stuff like that. But what the doctor told me is that when I blacked out, it's what it is all the emotional files that I've never closed, and all the things that bother me basically come together all at once, and it just basically overrides my just shuts down my system. I guess human disconnect is what I would call it. But like it's the same thing. Like if I attended a lot of meetings, and I did get a sponsor, and I managed to stay sober, and I didn't even feel like drinking when I had that. It wasn't even in my mind. And I did make amends with my mom. We talked for about 2 hours. She did say that she was a terrible mom, and I kind of laughed, and I said, well, I was a terrible son. So I think that makes it about even. So she laughed. So I was it was good that we had to talk. We were getting, and we had a lot of things. We were getting along really good anyway. But back then it was hard. I mean, I was a hard child to deal with too.
Well, and I think you had the opportunity to be able to have a laugh and be able to speak with your mom. And I think this you started speaking about issues around relationships, and I imagine that it's the relationships that are closest to us that can be the hardest at times. Oftentimes I hear things like people who have BPD or emotion dysregulation can manage very well in the workplace, where relationships maybe not be as close, and then the closest relationships, the parents, the partners, the kids, can be a little more difficult when there's just more closeness, more intimacy, the relationships that are closer. Does that make sense given what you've experienced? Yeah. Now, can you speak at all around any? I think you mentioned certainly what one of the doctors that you spoke to said. Have you ever had any sort of other than that, any stigma, anything else around that at all, around the diagnosis of BPD?
Well, I think well, people, the thing is like I was more of a loner and wanted to do stuff, be creative and stuff. I go to my grandmother's house to make crafts and stuff like that. But I mean, going to dances and stuff like that, I always felt really uncomfortable. I think there's always like one different person in the class or something where, so there's, but I don't know. And even at work, I never really had too much trouble. I did a lot of work. I didn't really have too much trouble with, because, it's, it's hard because I mean, even the doctors have said, well, what an ugly diagnosis borderline personality disorder is. But I don't think so at all. I think I have advantages. And it really should be called emotion controlled deregulation, because I think the borderline part came from when basically there's normal people all the time, there's psychotic people all the time, and then they called people borderline because they could be either or sort of thing, where they struggle or have their outbursts and stuff like that, which doesn't really mean anything to me. Maybe people think, it's a borderline crazy stuff or something like that, but it doesn't, I don't think that name really suits it. But.
No, and I that would be true. And I love that you mentioned that. So for those of us, I'll just summarize, is that it used to be years ago, before they had the big blue book with all the different diagnoses that they're adding to exponentially every year, that it was you were either psychotic or neurotic. So way back when, in the days of Freud and just after. And of course, when people came in and presented with some of the challenges that we know with BPD, they weren't able to put them into either of those categories because there's a tendency to sort of move back and forth. And so that's where the whole name borderline came from. So you're exactly right, Blake, the idea that it was sort of on the borderline. Yeah. And that is how borderline personality disorder was named. And so it kind of stuck. And I think you're right. I think emotion regulation, emotion dysregulation, I think really fits a lot better to what's going on, because I think that for all of the traits, and we know the traits for BPD, some of them being fears of abandonment, challenges with a strong sense of self, having difficulty with relationships, sort of in terms of knowing who you are and what your values are. So these are some of the things that may be the challenges that people might have with BPD. And of course, all of it, I believe, is related to emotion dysregulation. I think especially the fears of abandonment, around having a fear if someone is to leave, or a partner or a friend or someone who's close to you, and you're worried about them leaving, then of course that's going to bring up sort of intense fears, because we tend to have this again with the identity as well. When we don't have a strong sense of self, we tend to really bind close to those who are close to us. So when somebody may leave or you lose this relationship, it's that much bigger for those of us who experience emotion dysregulation. So I think this is piece, and I bring this up. I know, Blake, one of the things at the top of your list here was really talking about challenges with relationships. So I think that, one of my theories, and I probably read somewhere something similar, that's one of the, or a couple of the reasons why there are challenges around relationships and intense fear. I'm wondering, you have here what amazing qualities, and I'm loving this. I really love, and I know all the speakers will have something to say about this. I do believe there are so many strengths for people with BPD. And if anyone hasn't seen the video, it's called The Gentle Power of Positive People. It's a TED Talk. It's a beautiful 15-minute video that we like to show in the first night of our course, because it just speaks so highly of those who are sensitive and how the world needs sensitive people. And so I strongly suggest that people watch that. So I touched on some of the amazing qualities that people with BPD have. I'm wondering if you wanted to add to that, what qualities you feel you have, because you've mentioned a few times that it is a gift and there's something there that you have, and you even mentioned the word advantages. I'm wondering, what amazing qualities do you feel you have with BPD?
I'm very artistic. I remember when I was working for a company and they were throwing all the slates out. They were all center slates, so I bought them very cheap, and then I brought them home, and I cut all the end pieces out and made sets out of them and stuff like that, where no one ever really thought of that. As soon as I looked at it, I thought, I could fix them, sort of thing. So I think a great imagination, and sometimes maybe too much of an imagination, but yeah, I like creating things like that. I think I can focus a lot on just the one thing. And and there is, as far as it can work the other way too. Like when I was playing a lot of pool, I could regulate my emotions to control them very well, because I won a lot of tournaments and stuff like that. So I also found sometimes would be stuck where I felt like I really couldn't play, and but I had struggled with that before. So I just sort of I just, after a few shots, I could play again. Where I think if I was just a person who has never really been overly challenged like that, I might just fall apart where I could sort of regroup and then, get it back together again. Because, those challenges, I get them a lot. So if it's a really big challenge, if I'm very mindful about it and work hard at it, I can do a lot of things, very challenging things and get it done pretty good.
I think that's definitely one of the positive traits as well. I have that on my list, is that when we are, those of us who have emotional dysregulation are used to managing and dealing with intense emotions, often dealing with crises, more challenges, just sort of getting through the day, especially when, things might be going wrong. And so I do believe that as one of the strengths is that if you're used to having to manage in a crisis, that when a crisis happens, may be that much more able to manage and to deal with it. So I totally see that as a strength, Blake. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
We have a question, Julie.
Oh, good.
Yeah, great. So so we have a question from Namira. It's an assessment question. Did the psychiatrist do a proper assessment, or did they diagnose based on a consultation? So maybe just your experience.
Well, basically, I talked to him for about 15 minutes. So he asked me about my childhood and, a few things, but he didn't really listen to what I was saying so much. I just sort of, he just wrote it off as, basically, I think you're just saying basically you're an alcoholic, and the only one can help alcoholic and just help themselves too. But he really wasn't much help at all. Really, he didn't say anything. So, like the second psychiatrist I saw, I spent a lot of time with him, and he talked to me like a normal person. So I say the first guy, like he just kind of took like maybe an educated guess, but he didn't really listen to a lot of things that I had said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important. Thank you for your question, and thank you for addressing that, Blake. And one question for Julie. You mentioned a video. If you could just repeat the name of the video again so our attendees could access it.
Sure. It's called The Gentle Power of The Gentle Power of Sensitive People. The Gentle Power of Sensitive People. And it is a TED Talk. So if you Google that title with the TED Talk, you will find it. It's easy to find. I love the video myself. When I came across it, I just felt so great. And when we show it in the first night of the course, I love seeing that some people tear up. And I think, and I've asked, it's like the same feeling I get when I'm watching that, is feeling like that it's like I belong somewhere in the world, like having people feel that, that they belong somewhere in a particular set of individuals who are super important in the world, that are needed in the world. And so I encourage everyone to watch this. It's a really great video. I love that you started talking about myths, Blake. Oh, is there any other questions before I talk a little bit about myths? We have a few more minutes.
Oh, we're all good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm doing a piece on this, and it seems like a good time to mention some of these things. So the myths of BPD, and I mentioned I cringe at some of these, and I'm sure I'm going to get some people cringing. So I've spoken to some people, and again, I'm putting together a little video on the myths of BPD, and I have a little short list here, and I'd like to share it with you. So I heard someone say that they went for help to get help for their BPD, and they were told that they only treat real illnesses here. And I thought, oh my goodness. So that was one thing I heard. Someone, thank you for sharing that, the person who might be here who shared some of these with me. And another one that someone heard, and of course that's a healthcare practitioner. Another one is I know somebody who had a PhD, and they went to visit a doctor. They had done plenty of work, plenty of Googling to find out that they really felt like they had BPD, like a lot of the traits fit. So they went in, they mentioned this, and the doctor said to them, start cringing now, persons with BPD don't make it past grade 10, and that there's no way that is possible that this person had BPD because she had a PhD. So I just want to dispel this myth because that's why I'm bringing these up. It's, you know, I work with people who have 2 and 3 university degrees and highly successful. So this is definitely a huge myth. There's such, you know, myths out there about this disorder that we really need to educate people. You know, more education, more events like this, really, you know, get the word out. Another one was, let me see here. So another one, again, a healthcare practitioner, you don't have BPD because you're not manipulative and nasty. So this was a healthcare practitioner, no word of a lie here. So some of these things, and again, I want to dispel because it hurts me to even say these, but I think they're important to bring up because this is some of the thinking that's out there. So we really need to dispel this because, you know, I've worked with people with BPD for many, many years, and beautiful. I love working with people. You know, there's such beauty and a gift, and the sensitivities, again, you know, we mentioned advantages. So I you know, I don't feel at all any of these. And so what else? I think we have one more I'll share, and then we'll be moving to our next speaker.
I'm sorry, Julie. Just
Another
one,
question?
well, yeah, one more question since we're on the topic of diagnoses.
Oh, good, yeah.
One of our attendees, Margaret, when did BPD go into the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and roughly what years did BPD really become a diagnosis?
Interesting. Okay, so I know that Marsha Linehan started working with people who presented with this set of traits about 30, 35 years ago. So we know Marsha Linehan herself had BPD. She may not have been diagnosed because it wasn't a formal diagnosis then. So when she started working with people with this set of challenges, then I believe it was after that it went into the DSM. I don't know the exact year, and it's certainly something I feel like I want to go Google and find out. But I believe it's been in the DSM, I would say, for at least 20 years, I think, which, you know, again, that's a high number to think that there's still this many misnomers about this disorder around it being something, you know, so many people think that it isn't. So I think that's the point there. Does that answer that question more or less? I wish I could say the year. I in fact would love to know that. I probably will be looking it up after this webinar, but it's been a long time. And so we shouldn't have all of this miscommunication. Oh, thank you. I knew somebody would come up with this. I'm sure people are Googling away. I was just waiting for it. So what have we got? It was first introduced in the United States in 1938. 1938. Wow. So I think the DSM may not have existed, at least not to the point it is now. So I do highly believe that it would have been presented as certainly as a concept and a disorder well before it went into the DSM for sure. So yeah, so that's really helpful. Many years ago. Yep. Is there any more questions?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Blake, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. And you know, you continue to do good work out there. I know you share the strengths of DBT and helping others with your story and with addiction, and continue doing that. You're doing great work. And thank you so much for joining us today.
And happy birthday, Blake.
Yeah,
Oh, happy birthday.
No.
Yes, happy birthday. Celebrate.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we are now going to introduce to you our musician for our intermission. So we're going to have a little live music intermission with Amanda Mendoza. And so we'd like to introduce our live music intermission with musical guest Amanda Mendoza, who will later be speaking about her lived experience with emotion dysregulation. Amanda will be doing a cover of Fleetwood Mac's Dreams. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. All right, are we ready to roll? I guess we're good.
Ready to roll.
All right, here we go. Now here you go again. You say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep it down? carefully to the sound of your loneliness, like a heartbeat drives you mad. In the stillness of remembering what you had, and what you lost, and what you had, and what you lost. Thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. Say when they will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you know. You know. Now here I go again, I'll see with crystal visions. I keep my visions to myself. It's only me who wants to wrap around your dreams. And have you any dreams you like to sell? Dreams of loneliness, like a heartbeat drives you mad. In the stillness of remembering what you had, and what you lost, and what you had, and what you lost. Oh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. Say women, they will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you know. Oh, thunder only happens when it's raining. Players only love you when they're playing. Say women, they will come and they will go. When the rain washes you clean, you know. You know. You will know. Oh, you know. That's it.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Here we go. Put this away.
Yes. Amanda, that was amazing. That was great. And it really touches on what Blake was talking about earlier, some interpersonal relationship challenges, our
Mhm.
emotions. So wonderful song. So Amanda, I'm going to just introduce you. She is a passionate singer and artist, as well as a teacher.
Mhm.
And she is planning to work abroad. She enjoys everything the arts, and she is a twin.
I do.
She has a twin sister. So most of the activities she may share with her twin sister, or mainly by herself. She enjoys her own serenity and solitude, as well as she enjoys reading comics. She's a comic collector.
Yeah.
And plays a lot of video games. And she is here with us to share her lived experience with emotion dysregulation. So yes, Amanda, I'll leave it with you if you want to talk about some of your lived experience and challenges and strengths. And how was it when you had found out that you were diagnosed, or you had that you were formally diagnosed with emotion dysregulation / BPD?
You know what? It, I was going through a lot of different things going on. I was in my teen stage. So obviously it's a point of where you're kind of getting to know who you are. It's the age of recognizing who you are as a person and what you want to build on. And for me, I noticed that I've had a lot of emotional challenges, even as a child, but it's only become more and more apparent in my relationships. What I like to note say as well is that, it's hard for us to keep, it's hard to keep relationships. And for me, it was definitely a big challenge. It was not only love relationships, friends, and, family members too. But I noticed that, my emotions were becoming a little bit out of hand, and I couldn't, I had no control. And I didn't understand how I could control it at the time. So with that, I thought to seek help. I did this as, I think I was 17 years old. I was still really young. I went on my own, went to a doctor's office, told them, hey, I've been feeling this, I've been feeling that. I didn't know any of the medical terms or anything for BPD or anything. I had no idea that existed at the time. But when the doctor told me, okay, so you've experienced this, you've experienced that, this sounds like it's borderline to me. And I'm like, what is that? Because it's, you never really hear about it. And from then I started to look into what BPD is and try to make sure that, hey, I have this, I have that, and kind of mark off, okay, I guess it's something that I have to accept that I have. I just thought it was anxiety. I just thought it was because I was an antisocial person. Like, oh, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was just super anxious at the time. And from then the doctor told me to go downtown to I think it was one of the mental health centers, and they were questioning, anything, I mean, basically whatever they would question you with, in terms of how do you react to something, and I'm not going to go into detail about it because it is a sensitive topic, but they will ask you questions about how you what your challenges are and how would you react. And doing that made it a little bit more positive for me to know that, hey, yeah, I have BPD and I need to know what the next steps are. So with that, my family doctor, I spoke to her as well. So I've gone to a bunch of doctors. I've been trying to get as much help as I could because I was alone on this, to be honest. And, I was afraid of taking medication. I didn't know what it was going to do to me. I had no idea. And that was the most challenging part. Being on several medications that will either, make it better or not, and it's basically just finding the right, the right pill for yourself, because I believe I've gone through like 4 different types of medications with, while struggling with BPD, and I found that some didn't work. Some of them made it worse. Some of them, they have their pros and cons, but it's really finding which pill was the most suitable for me, because we all have a different way of how our minds work and how our brains work and everything. And it's also the chemical imbalance in your brain. And so as I've gone through the different various medications, I felt certain for one medication for sure after, the 4th one. And I was like, okay, well, this is helping me stabilize my emotions, helping me not to get into a, snowball effect with everything. and it helped me to regulate my emotions. And
How did that feel like, Amanda? So this is, and just to be clear, that was when you were 17 years old, and then your journey at this point was still in and around your teens.
yeah,
And then what did that feel like when you reached a point where you felt emotionally regulated?
to be honest, I felt like BPD never happened. I felt like, I never had any like emotional dysregulation. I felt like I was free. I was so afraid of, for me, I'm afraid of judgment, and I'm afraid of how people see and perceive me. So it was a big thing for me to not feel those things every day, because I struggled with that. And it felt like I was cleansed in a way where, from struggling ever since I was a little girl till, high school, and then seeking the help and everything, it made me feel proud of myself, because I was like, hey, I've gone through A, B, and C, and I've made it to my way to getting better. And, I started to just look back and be like, oh my God, I would not have ever thought I would be able to do this for myself, because I lacked a lot of the love I had for myself and the respect I had for myself. And I felt like I didn't, like I didn't need it, and I didn't matter. But I ended up realizing, like there's self-worth in you. And we carry these negative ideas in our head when, none of them really matter. None of the negative ideas of yourself are true. And that's what I kept doing to myself. But the medication did help me, have a clearer view of how life is. Life wasn't easy without the medication, for sure, and without the help. It was really difficult for me.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so the help. So
Mhm.
later on in your life,
Yep.
then there were some more challenges, and then you were introduced to dialectical behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
So at one point, did you feel that the medication was helpful, but then you now needed the extra support?
Yeah, and definitely I did. I felt like, okay, yeah, this is a temporary fix for the medication. And to be honest, I don't want to be on it for the rest of my life, because I know that there's other terms of, or other ways of assisting service or having services for BPD. And when I learned about something called DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, a great friend of mine helped me out, and we were trying to find services that will take me in as one of the participants to do the DBT, the DBT classes and everything. And so, I booked an appointment, went to CAMH, spoke to a psychiatrist. I asked him, like, what can I do from here? I'm lost. I'm taking medication, but yet I'm still having, difficulties with my emotion. And he said, well, DBT is the way to do it. You're going to have to stick and commit to doing dialectical behavioral therapy. And I was like, okay, so how do I enroll in that? And to be honest, it took a long time. I think it took about 1.5 years. The wait list is long, but it's worth it, because we'd rather start now than wait later on in life. It's but when I got when I got all the information that I needed, and when I got help from the psychiatrist, he told me that this place, Stella's place, which is in Toronto, will take in people that would like, for free, that would like to sign up for DBT courses. And so I was one of those people. And I believe this was going on when COVID was happening. So this was about, I think, 2019. I took online DBT courses, one-on-one with one of the representatives of Stella's place, and he taught me a bunch of stuff. A lot of it was mindfulness, and you know, he spoke about how ways that I can cope with thinking, or ways that I can try to not get too ahead of myself when I think about certain things. And there's some strategies that, you know, he taught me about DBT, and one of them was, well, obviously there's mindfulness, and there was also, so mindfulness was basically, you know, not being judgmental about it. You're in your own mind, you're just kind of seeing how things are, being aware. And he also told me that, yeah, you gotta be aware of where you are, where you're sitting, what you're touching, what you're feeling, what you're sensing, and your surroundings. Just try to bring that all in. And I had trouble with that because I could not focus. I was so into my own thoughts that it became like a spiral for me, you know. But you know, when I was finished with DBT, I took those experiences and I tried to use them on my everyday basis. You know, but to be honest, you have to practice it. Like BPD doesn't go away like that. If you wish it went away like that, it's not. You have to accept that you have it, and you have to try to work with it, because it's going to be with you no matter what, you know? And I've accepted, hey, I'm someone with BPD, and I acknowledge how I'm feeling, and I know I'm feeling this way, and what can I do, or what can't I do? I can't control everything, obviously, but what can I do to, you know, make the situation better, right? And that's what it usually is for me. It's accepting the fact that I have it. And, you know, I stigmatize myself with that stuff because my family doesn't believe in mental health. So I try my best to be someone that can definitely speak from experience, and, you know, try to educate people that find it, you know, mental health or BPD is nothing, it's whatever. And educate, you know, that, you know, everybody has obviously a problem or a difficulties in something, and whether it be, I think Darcy said, if whether it be physical or if it be mental, it's still something that you deal with every day, right? You can't see it. You don't know what the other person's thinking. You don't know what they're going through, but everyone has their own thing to deal with, right?
Yeah.
So that was basically how I dealt with it.
Yeah. And so, you know, you've got a couple of things on your plate. You are a teacher, you're looking to work abroad, and of course you're autistic. When you're dealing with emotion dysregulation, does that come out more in your work, in your career, relationships, social interactions, strangers, family, romantic partnerships? Where does that come out most? And when do you practice your skills, and where does your DBT skills, such as mindfulness, really come out, and where you're able to utilize that skill most?
For me, it usually comes out at work. Before, in the past, it was always my romantic relationships, but I've learned to deal with it the appropriate way. But it was something that was happening at work all the time, because I would find that I put myself down really badly. Especially being an educator, I'm working with children, and the way that I see it is, you know, I'm the one educating the children, and I'm the one giving them all of the resources they need and what they have to know, you know, and that was a big thing for me because I was in charge of it, you know. And I would always either cry after work. I would get so upset and frustrated because I couldn't understand something. You know, I would go home and tell my sister, hey, I don't think I should be doing this. I don't think I should be, you know, socializing or doing anything that makes me emotionally unstable. And I mean, prior to being a teacher, I was in social services too. So, you know, I jumped a lot, but in terms of job related stuff, I'm always finding that I'm either feeling very fatigued, you know, I don't want to talk to anybody, or I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. Like, why, you know, I would tell myself, why would you hire me? You know, why, I'm no good, you know. I wouldn't hire myself if I was you. If I was a manager, I wouldn't hire myself, you know. And I've, as terrible as that sounds, I've actually said it to one of my managers at one point, and they were surprised because, you know, like, when do you ever hear that from someone? And I was very insecure because of the abilities I've had and disabilities I've had, you know. Yeah.
So it sounds like now with DBT, you're able to look into your thoughts and recognize those distortions.
Yep.
And give yourself the self-care that you need. You're
Yeah.
finding some strengths. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And what would you say would be some of the strengths from emotion dysregulation?
You know, people with, I think myself, and I'm not going to compare myself to anybody else, but I'm a very empathetic person. I can sense someone's emotion just like that, and it's very heavy on me. So, you know, like, if someone's having a bad day, I can just feel their vibration of energy on me, and I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta move away. I know it's not gonna do good for me. And I'd say I'm pretty passionate in terms of things that I, you know, am interested in. And in terms of relationships too, I find that I always put myself like 100% in it. Like, I'll go to the ends of the world for you if you treat me the way I should be treated. And it's kind of sad too, because even if they don't treat me the way I want to be treated, I'll still do it. Like, I'm just, you know, I just feel this need to treat others the way I want to be treated, and feel for other people, and, you know, have this idea that I don't know what they're going through. Maybe I can try to make their day a little bit better, you know. And I find that I tend to cheer people up as much as I can. And a lot of the time, you know, people don't know behind the mask I'm I'm really showing myself. And, you know, I put a mask on every day. And the mask is usually me being a smiling, happy, charismatic, you know, positive, passionate person. But when I'm alone, you know, when I'm in my room, that's when I'm like, oh, lights out, time to cover myself in my sheets and like have my own little space. And that's the best thing for me. But for someone, my strengths have always been part of, you know, my emotion and how I sense other people's emotion. It's a very, very, you know, it's a constant thing for me. It gets exhausting sometimes, but, you know, just got to work with it.
Yeah. It's almost like a superpower in a way.
I'm-
You're hyper
Yeah.
empathetic.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's kind of funny. I have, I'm pretty sure you've mentioned that I have a twin, and it's kind of funny, but I mentioned to my boyfriend that, oh, I can sense when my sister's upset if she's like far apart from me, or if she's in another, you know, city or whatever. And, you know, I'll just cry randomly, and, you know, I wouldn't know why. So sometimes when that happens, I'll text my sister and be like, hey, you okay? And she'd be like, no, I just had a terrible day. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's not me. It's, you know, this telepathy that I have with my sister. And I think the best thing for it too is that I judge it, how to proceed with the emotion. If someone is having if someone that you're around, let's say a friend or a coworker's having a really bad day, and you can sense it off of them, you can find ways to deal with the situation. How do you go about it? How am I able to make this person's day a little bit better? You know, not a lot of people can read, you know, the emotions and stuff. So I think for me, it's a blessing that I have it. Yet, you know, I'm still practicing and trying to maintain myself. You know, self-care is very important. But yeah, you're right. It's like it's like a superpower in a way, you know?
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you were able to share that. And, so often do you hear invalidating statements that you're too sensitive,
Oh yeah. Oh
you're
my
too
God.
emotional.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Sorry. Yes, I hear that all the time. And it
Mhm.
drives me bonkers. Like I'm just like, oh, okay, relax, relax. This isn't your first go around with this. But yeah, that's a big thing that people say. You're too sensitive. Stop being so sensitive, you know? And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't help it. This is me, you know? So
Yeah. But
yeah,
there's the flip side to that,
yeah,
is that you're emotionally aware
yeah.
and
And I
you're
know,
present. Yeah.
yeah, you realize it. Other people see it, and I know it already. You don't have to tell me. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And so often we live in the world, a very fast-paced world where just constantly programmed to try to just be rational and just go from A, B to C
Yeah.
and numb those emotions. And it's great and to embrace these emotions in a wise mind, of course, to
Mhm.
balance it out. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Let's see if there's any
We have-
questions.
Yes, we
Okay.
have some questions and a few things that came up. I was just looking back at some really interesting things. So I just want to make sure one is actually someone asking Amanda if you're on Spotify or if they could find your music. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. I'm actually on SoundCloud. Spotify, I have no idea how to do it, but I'm on SoundCloud. I don't remember my SoundCloud because nobody really asked for my SoundCloud, but I will definitely put that as an answer on the question and answer board. If that's okay, is that all right?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat
Yeah.
after. You can put it there that everyone will see it.
Sounds good.
That would be great. Now we did have a question around medication. I know that had come up when you were speaking, and I certainly wanted to not ignore that question. And I also want to make sure that we stay away from talking about specific medications, I think, in this webinar.
Mhm.
I think I know a lot about medications, and I've worked with people with BPD. However, I'm not a doctor, so I want to make sure that we don't get into any conversations around medication. So if that person who put that question out there wants to reach out to me, Julie at dialecticalliving.ca, I would be happy to answer any questions around medications. I hope that's fair for the person who asked that question. There's another one, actually. Let me see. There's one I was asking about whether there's any movies that are related to BPD, and I think Girl Interrupted came up as one. One thing I remember I wanted to mention that there was it was a series, I can't remember, it was some years ago, and there was two people talking, and one of them had said something and the other one said, I have BPD and I know you're lying right now. And so it was this positive thing, right? Because it's like people who are more sensitive, who are more tuned in, who can read emotions, and I'm sure may be able to know when someone is feeling sadness, when they might be lying, maybe they might be embarrassed. Like, we can pick up on those emotions sort of much more readily. So when someone asked me that question at a talk I did some time ago, I had mentioned that this was one positive thing that I saw in the media about something around BPD. And of course, we see so many things that aren't. There's actually a film called, it's called Mindfulness. It is the best film I have ever seen that really relates to a character who I really feel is an amazing character and really displays, what it's like to have BPD or emotion dysregulation in a very, let's say, not entirely neutral, but it's very real. So very real, and none of it is sort of stigmatizing, where she's actually a very beautiful character. And she just runs into some challenges around emotion dysregulation. So I think it's Mindfully. I'm going to look it up and put it in the chat because it really is a good film. And I wanted to say, Amanda, you had mentioned, about not feeling good enough. And, my hope and my wish for everyone here and people who have BPD, and I do know that this is definitely one of the challenges. It's a big challenge for people. And I know that the clients that I work with, there's this sort of almost like a self-hating, almost where it's like a self-loathing even. I've heard it explained that deeply. And of course, it's super hard to get out there, learn skills and be skillful when you're having these feelings around, feeling like I'm not good enough, and maybe even perhaps not deserving enough. So I hear this sometimes with those who have emotion dysregulation. I believe that was everything. Let me just take a look and make sure there's not anything that I might be missing. Oh, thank you so much, Amanda. She's put it in the chat.
Yep.
Here's what and recommendations to help educate and equip people closest to you to understand BPD. This one is worth saying again. I missed some of it. So do you have helpful recommendations to help educate and equip people closest to you to understand BPD? I've experienced an overall lack of support due to many not understanding. I'd like to see, Amanda, if you'd like to answer that. I certainly have some ideas too, but I'll direct it your way in terms of any ideas you might have for that question.
For me, that one's a little bit tricky to answer because, in certain places, you can easily get the help, in some places you can't. But, I think that, do you want to go ahead on this one and I'll tag on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Certainly tag on. So it is a difficult question, and I think stigma comes up when I first read this question, and I think that some of the stuff out there that families, when they hear that their loved one might be diagnosed with BPD, and they may hear things that are scary or that maybe don't make sense, or very stigmatizing for their loved one. And often, especially with those close, there may be some denial, there may be some resentment, especially with siblings, where there might be some challenges around relationships within the family. So it's a really complicated question. My hope is that for everyone and for families, that they go and learn DBT skills, that the supporting of a loved one is really helpful when the entire family can learn DBT skills, so they can work together. Because often when the loved one goes out and learns these skills, then they go home, or they're connecting with their loved ones and they're attempting to be skillful, and this difference in how they're being might be hard for family members to accept that, wow, what is this? This is different now, and not really understand sort of what the DBT skills are. And so I think it's it answers the question in that if families sort of get together and learn skills together, I think things can be that much better. However, this is a step back in terms of this question, is like, how do you get the families to the DBT groups, right? I think is more to the point here. And how do we educate family members and others about what BPD is in a way that doesn't sort of push them away or scare them or make them think that, well, this isn't really going on for my family member, because there's 256 variations on this disorder, right? No two people are alike. In fact, I read something that said that if you were to see someone who presents with BPD, that they're more like their family members than they might be like their fellow BPD peeps. And so there's often in families, there may be some emotion dysregulation in family members. So often there's, that could be going on, which of course makes it even more complicated, especially if there is a denial of family members in terms of what may be happening for them, that they may also be experiencing certain traits. So a couple of things I'll wrap this up, is videos, I think, are sometimes better to educate than maybe articles and things like that. I think I've seen some really great videos that really portray the painful, piece of this disorder that you just can't seem to put into words. So I think there's some great videos out there that can help explain. So that's one thing. And I think it's really important that we educate ourselves and we have families educate themselves with people who understand DBT or understand BPD, because so many healthcare practitioners who may not understand the disorder and may not explain it to families in a way that is loving and compassionate, right? And I think that's a really important piece here, because I think many may not sort of see that piece of the disorder when it is so clearly there. So I think it's important that we, know who our families are talking to and try and educate them in a way that's puts stuff that's compassionate and loving. Because there's a book actually called, I mentioned this book so many times I should get royalties. It's Valerie Poor, and her book is called Overcoming Borderline Personality Disorder. And it's written from the perspective of her having a daughter with BPD. So it's written from a very loving, compassionate place. Unlike the book, for instance, Treading on Eggshells, Walking on Eggshells. That book, although people have found it helpful, it tends to have a very different slant to it, where it's not all about having compassion and love for our loved ones and understanding. So I think be careful what books you can read, because some books are good and some books might be explaining in a way that's not entirely loving and compassionate. I hope that helped answer that question. It is a complex question, and I'm sure we could talk about this for hours, but I did my best to hopefully answer that.
Perfect.
I think that's it there. Just let me check again, just to make sure we're not missing anything. Okay. I think that's all the questions.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us today.
Thank
And
you.
yes, we wish you all the best on your journey. All
Thank
right.
you. You too.
Okay. Now we have another speaker, and her name is Tracy.
In progress. Okay.
Okay, and for our next speaker, we have Tracy. Tracy is 47 years old. She's a wife, mother of teenagers, a daughter of a retired police officer, and a stay-at-home mom. She is at a turning point in her professional life, from systems analysis and human resources, going back to university for a more meaningful and fulfilling career in counseling and conflict resolution to better leverage her empathetic and intuitive strengths. She's a plein air artist who loves to paint nature and walk through woodland paths. Join me in welcoming Tracy. Oops.
Hi.
Hi, Tracy. Yes, so thank you for joining
Yeah.
us on this celebratory day, this celebratory month. Yeah, so you've made some transitions. Let's talk about your lived experience.
Yeah. Well, just to give you some background as to when I first learned about BPD, it was a long time ago in 2011. I was seeking counseling for the traumatic loss of my brother. He was killed in the line of duty when someone stole a snowplow and went on a rampage, ramming into cars and buildings throughout the downtown core. My brother was first on the scene and he was run over and killed. My grief and pain was severe and amplified many of my issues. A counselor suggested. So once my brother was killed, my grief and pain was severe. It was amplified many of my issues. A counselor suggested that I had characteristics of BPD and offered to do CBT and DBT. Now that we're well into this session, we know those acronyms by now, but CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. I started, but never really went deep into it back then. I just moved on and focused on my job and life in general. And I loved the intention at the time, but I never really focused for very long. It was just something new. And when I didn't really practice those steps to heal and move on with work, being, a mom and, a wife to my husband, I moved on, but with that feeling of emptiness. while on this hamster wheel, you know, always waiting for a better day. When I felt lonely, I would look to my husband to fill that void. And if he didn't, I'd look to say friends or my parents, when really I really need to fill those needs within myself. So 10 years later, I'm at a time in my life where I feel that, you know, BPT, when I was living in an invalidating environment, and I now have teenagers, and it's been a long couple of years, and they're becoming their own person. And I'm a first-time mom, you know, with teenagers, and teenagers who would, you know, kind of call me crazy, press those buttons, you know, and a husband that really didn't support me as a partner in parenting. I got myself some space and left for a month last October, and just left with, you know, in the city of Ottawa, just for a little while. I did it lovingly. I did not do it in a state of anger, and said it was time for me to reflect. It wasn't a separation. I love my family, I love my kids, I love my husband. But at the same time, the dialect, I wasn't living in a healthy environment. It was time for me, or time to know what it was like to be on my own for a bit, just a month I wanted. And it was great for like a day. Then I was left making things up in my mind and manifested quite the crisis. And I kind of lost it. My husband was nearing the end of his rope, of course, trying just to do whatever he could to make me happy. He indicated that I had something wrong with me, that all he wants for me to be was happy, whether it was with him or without him. I was at a loss. So those stories I was making up in my mind while I was gone, I could see they were not facts, just feelings, but it felt so real. So I reached out for counseling again. I thought back to the time when that counselor indicated that I had BPD and wondered, have I ignored it all this time? Have I left an opportunity to get better only to delay true progress and healing? When I reached out for counseling, I indicated that I was undiagnosed BPD, and I was ready to work on DPD because I needed to fix this. Finally, I'm going to focus this in for the longer term. But it wasn't easy. Many places required that diagnosis before practicing DBT with them. Assessments could cost as much as $2,000 and wait times for months. And I wanted the help right now. I felt in crisis. And so I Googled various counselors, organizations, and I was in a great spot to, you know, get help. I was in the city, not necessarily in my normal rural area. And it was actually not as easy. I could find a psychotherapist just as easily, but I kind of had an idea as to what I wanted to focus on. And I was lucky. I was able to find this online, it was COVID times, this online version of DBT through Dialectical Living. And I haven't really looked back. I'm just looking at my notes here, offered it online. Yeah. And since then, I've been able to structure myself in the knowledge and practice of DBT.
Did we lose Tracy again?
And I'm still on that journey to heal. And I'm still with my family. I've learned so much without the significant cost. I was able to see a psychiatrist through my doctor's referral, finally. And by then I had already been going to DBT. That's how long time sometimes it can take to get to see a doctor for a diagnosis. And I couldn't imagine waiting and not knowing what I had put under my belt with skills and tools and techniques that dialectical and DBT skills could provide for me. I was really thankful that I took it upon myself to take some of those steps. By the time I saw that psychiatrist, he was like, "You're already taking group DBT? Wow, that's amazing. Where?" Because I may need to know. As discussed earlier, it was a very quick assessment that I don't have BPD. However, I might have traits of BPD. Instead, he suggested that I have PTSD from my brother's death. Regardless, it doesn't matter. The group DBT is going to help. And so I've continued on. So really, I've benefited more from the DBT and the sessions that I have had for the last year than I have in seeing a psychiatrist. How does BPD impact me? Well, it's been discussed quite a bit. I'm ultra sensitive. That is a common factor here for many of us, I see. I have a pattern of unstable relationships. I cut the cord when I lose trust or feel disrespected. Disrespect is a huge trigger for me. I feel wronged when this happens and have a hard time to, get over it. 1 second here. My first thoughts tend to be on the negative side of things. That causes a lot of controversy with those who are the closest to me, my immediate family. Couple this with poor self-image and it all tends to be self-destructive. I make stories up in my mind that make me go in a downward spiral towards depression. I look to my husband or the people I love or the closest to help me get out of it, when really the answer is within me and not anybody else. And that's a lot of pressure for them. I worry about abandonment from my family because I'm always in a kind of a state of controversy. And all of these things I've been working and I know I feel better, even since October, even since 2011. I get hurt easily being ultra sensitive, especially these days with teenagers. They can really tear you down. This time with teens has been the crux for me and my family environment, the dynamic, and I know that this too shall pass. The strengths, that dialect of being an ultra sensitive being, I wouldn't give it up for the world. Because that's where my intuition comes from. That's where my empathy comes from. And it can have a deep, meaningful connection with people. And that's why I know now that I'm midlife that I will be an amazing counselor and use those skills to my betterment. Control is another thing, another trait that I have that is the dialect. I want to control. I would have expectations so high. I would hope people could read my cue cards. I would hold up for them. This is the response that you're supposed to say. This is what you're supposed to say. I would say to my husband, but you can't control people. So I can't think to myself, they've wronged me. They let me down because they didn't meet my expectation, that sense of control that I needed. And so I'm working on that. And that's not a strength of BPD, but having, a control. I am a great project manager. I am a great, if I have a series of things to do, I'll have my cake and eat it too. I can do it all, I'll plan it out. So control can be good, but being aware of where it's not that great, it can really get in the way of being happy in my life. So the amazing qualities that I do recognize in myself is a great sense of loyalty. I'm a good listener. I relate to others who have similar traits as me. So with those strengths, I endeavor towards my master's degree to become that counselor and maybe spread the word on this DBT. It's a part of a resolution. It's part of a practice for healing. How has DBT helped me? Listening to Marsha Lanahan, I remember being in Ottawa in October by myself and doing all this research, and I heard DBT, but I didn't know who created it. And I heard who created it, and she's got this workbook and she's got this book. And so I'm a good, audiobook listener. And so I downloaded her recent memoir on building a life worth living. And it was the first time I've heard of radical acceptance and some of those tools and techniques that she had. And I was like, that really resonated with me, that radical acceptance. I needed in your household, but they're not under your control. You might be the parent, but they're not yours to necessarily control. They're their own people. I thankfully found in Dialectical Living's group, DBT, was a great platform to connect with others. And with that connection to heal, I really enjoyed knowing that I'm not alone, knowing that there's so many others that are just like me, and that's okay. And self-regulation and wise mind and the radical acceptance, those skills work best for me, provide me with the space to make better decisions, because I could have left my family. I could have been angry and felt very wronged and cut the cord with them too. And I knew that would have left me in a space of loneliness and not in a better situation. So it's letting go of wanting to control those other people's ways of being, to read, the expectations that I have of people, and consistent feeling of being let down. I've had to let that go and practice that. Self-validation, huge. It's a big one for me. And I was living with members of my family who didn't understand the impacts to me of what they were saying or doing. And I need to work on making a better balance of, instead of looking for validation, for it to come with know me, have the confidence, and take a step back and have the space. So my experience in seeking treatment with BPD, I kind of went through that already. And with respect to stigmatization, Julie really touched on it, in that this sensitivity that I have, the pattern of broken relationships and friendships, mainly with my family, they can see those patterns too. And acknowledging that I needed help, and acknowledging that I have gotten help for it, and it's working. They could see I'm in a better place right now. I'm stronger. I'm now dealing with my family thinking that I'm the one with issues. So there is a bit of stigma there that we're working out, and there's a big learning curve there. And although they probably might not think, they're not in the headspace to go and take a course themselves, being family member of someone with PTSD or BPD traits or whatever, I'm going to have to educate them. And that's okay. And I will. Things are much better in the household, more because of the space that I'm in, and getting the space. There it goes again. I just got torn down, but I'm not reacting. I'm more in wise mind. Take a breath and get some space and walk away. I'm not reacting. I'm not going into the fight. I'm not going into you disrespected me and I'm triggered. So I'm proud of myself, and that I've grown from the person who I was years ago, last October, and thanks to DBT, I'm consistently practicing tools and techniques for healing. My telling you the story provides with the platform also for healing. So thank you for listening, and thanks for that.
Thank you, Tracy. That was wonderful. And thank you for just so much love, and so your journey is just so passionate, and there's so much strength. And from a project manager to a counselor, you're going to do so well with the lived experience that you have. So
Oh.
thank you.
Oh my, I believe you're following in the same path as me. My previous career, I was a project manager in IT actually. Worked on a lot of large scale international projects, and I have my PMP, which was really hard to get, really hard exam to do the professional project manager, for those of you who may not know. And my calling was really as a counselor. You know, my calling was really to help people, and I was lost, and I was good at what I did as a project manager, because of course I was the one they'd call in with the soft skills, the one they'd call in when the project had gone to a mess where everyone was fighting with each other. It would be like, let's call Julian because she's the one who's going to get everyone back on track. So I really believe that, you know, the sensitivity, the empathy, you know, actually gives us skills to be able to do so many different things, especially when it comes to relationships. Like we maybe we're not so great sometimes with close relationships. However, I speak for myself, of course, when I'm managing in work relationships, sometimes it's easier.
Mhm.
So we do have a
Yeah.
question here. We've got, when did you take a month off? I just left my family temporarily to get space and clarity.
In October, last October. And it was, looking back, it was painful. It was scary. But sometimes out of crisis, you hit the nail on the head and you go from there, kind of. And if I didn't, I might not have gotten to where I am to seek the DBT again, to go, you know what? I know about DBT, and my husband is telling me that there's something truly wrong. And I had to let.
Oh dear. Thankfully,
I wouldn't have had the space to process that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I think you cut out.
a little bit.
Did
That
I?
was a very good answer, Tracy.
I
hope
think
that
okay.
Tracy.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thank you, Tracy, so much for joining us again. I'm just so proud of everyone. So how do people feel about doing a video? Let's change it up, and we're gonna watch a video. Allison, just 5 more minutes. I think it's a good moment to share a compilation that was done. I want to make sure everyone gets the chance to watch it who's here, because so much was put into it. And the folks who did it, I'm equally proud of for coming forward and you know, sending videos and pictures. So I'd love to share that with you now.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tracy.
Thank you.
from Squamish, BC, and I've suffered from severe emotional dysregulation since a bad accident 11 years ago. But thanks to stem cells, I can play the fiddle and rock climb again, and thanks to DBT skills such as the welcoming meditation practice, I'm slowly regaining control and enjoying more and more of the time in between dysregulation. And the silver lining is that my sensitivity actually allows me to be more creative when I'm composing my music.
I'm so proud again of everyone. Thank you. I hope that I think most of you who sent pictures and photos and videos, I'm just so impressed with the creativity, the creativity that is out there in the BPD community, and just how amazing and creative and resourceful and all of these great things. I love, thank you for strengths. Our theme here is celebrating strengths. So I'm just pleased to have that video. So that was our video interlude. And now we are going to continue on. Isabel?
Yes. Okay, we are going to introduce our last speaker, exuberant, ambitious, just wonderful, Allison, who holds a Master's of Library Information from Western University. She currently manages a retail store in the GTA. She enjoys cooking, thrift shopping, and reading. She says that DBT has been truly transformative in her life, and she evangelizes about it regularly to anyone who will listen. So please join me in welcoming Allison.
Hey everyone, I'm really
Hi.
excited to be talking here today. Thanks for the introduction, Isabel. So yeah, it's really exciting and it's been so encouraging to hear everyone's stories. And yeah, it's great to kind of be beating the stigma around BPD and emotional dysregulation.
Yes. So Allison, when did you first hear about BPD or emotion dysregulation?
Well, to be honest with you, I had a really terrible and unclear view of what BPD actually was. Like, again, you have those pop cultural touchstones and a very specific idea of what a person with emotional dysregulation is like. And also the term BPD, it doesn't really show a full picture. It's very, again, I understand why they're trying to change it, because it does have that scariness to it, like borderline, like on the borderline of what, you know what I mean? It can be very difficult in that sense. So when I first heard about it, I was very, I had a lot of really negative kind of images of what that was, what that looked like. So I didn't really connect it with myself. I always thought I was just very anxious or had a lot of stress, but yeah, it was different than that, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So,
Yeah, that could be difficult. And so the experience with it, like, how did it impact you directly in your life?
In terms of BPD, as I was mentioning, I struggled with mental health stuff for about, honestly, since I was younger, but looking into more specific ways of how to manage my mental health for about the last 10 years or so. So in that, I kind of, through going to psychiatrists or some therapists, I kind of discovered that what I may have may be something along the lines of emotional regulation. For me, it's kind of part of like a little bit of a salad of mental health issues, which doesn't sound very appealing, but it's kind of the reality. Comorbidities are definitely a thing. So that's kind of how I became more aware of it. And then I looked at it and learned more about the diagnostic criteria and saw how it can be this spectrum of things that we've talked about today. It can encompass a lot and it can really look different from person to person. So I began to recognize myself more in that diagnostic criteria. So basically, kind of for me, I think with a lot of people, the BPD can be triggered by having a really chronically invalidating environment, as Marsha Linehan calls it. And some small t trauma and capital T trauma as a child, and also just being like having a natural emotional sensitivity, kind of combining with that, it sort of has put me in that BPD criteria. Some of my symptoms included like intense emotional swings, intense self-blame and doubt, fear of rejections and episodes of rage. How it affected me was kind of like a constant emotional storm coupled with a poor self-image that felt like it couldn't be untangled from my moods. So that's kind of how it presented in me, or presents.
And is this mainly in your personal life, in your work life, or just through all areas of your life?
I think it does affect a lot of areas of my life. I am very grateful that I do have some very solid friends and a very solid partner. So for me, my experience might be a little bit different than some people in that it's more relationships around the workplace and family stuff that is my biggest have been my biggest challenges. But obviously the threads kind of interweave into a lot of different aspects of your life. You can't really unpick them, but definitely for me, I've kind of had those areas of challenge.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Well, it's so great that you're maintaining a wonderful and strong relationship with your partner.
Yeah.
So what are some of the strengths that you have found in emotion dysregulation or BPD?
One of the big strengths, I think it's kind of hitting on a lot of things that people have said, but I definitely just like kind of, want to go back to this, is, the idea of empathy. But my biggest one that I would say is resilience. Like a lot of people I find with emotional dysregulation, BPD, have this resilience because our emotions can be excruciating at times. And, we can be very hard on ourselves and even sometimes destructive with certain, maladaptive behaviors. And there's the idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that's like kind of overly simplistic. And kind of we know now that like the book, The Body Keeps Score talks about this, but trauma can actually reframe your brain and it can have some really negative effects. So sometimes it doesn't always make you stronger. But that being said, there is something to be said for the sheer resilience of people with BPD. We continue to move forward despite having a rockier emotional landscape and having the odds kind of stacked against us in being very sensitive in a world that can be so difficult for that. And yeah, so the other main strength though is empathy, that definitely a lot of people have said. Feeling intense emotions makes you more empathetic because you know what it feels like to go through like overwhelming experiences. And I have friends and family tell me that they can be real with me in some of their like darkest kind of or most difficult emotions, and I won't judge them because it's like, yeah, I've been there kind of in that sort of sense, right? Like you can show me you're ugly because I have that sort of experience. So yeah, like there's a certain, I think, again, the empathy and what comes with that, it's like a rawness and honesty that can kind of result from that for sure.
Yeah, that's so great. And I'm sure your family really find value in that, where you're able to read those emotions and be highly empathetic.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. Yeah. And so in your BPD journey, you found dialectical living, or you looked into DBT. And so what has been your experience, and what's your favorite DBT skill even?
DBT has been like so amazing for me. Again, when I'd been on my therapy journey earlier, again, due to a lot of different factors in terms of like, economics, various things, I didn't really have consistent therapy. I've done a little bit of CBT, a little bit of more like psychoanalysis based stuff. So basically all that to say that CBT had some really good things with it, but it didn't quite fit for me. And I couldn't figure out why, because a lot of it was quite good. I just felt like something was really missing. So then when I learned more about DBT by just reading up on different therapy modalities, and again, coming from an information science background, I just like will research anything ad nauseum. So like when I found that kind of, it's so clinically effective in populations with emotional dysregulation, I was like, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to look into. And it's really worked great for me. Again, the skills group has been amazing. I want to, in the future, probably do more on one-on-one basis with people and whatnot, but it's just really set me kind of on my journey. And I feel like it's been the most effective thing that I've tried in my experience in terms of therapy. So, yeah.
Yeah. That was DBT. So you did CBT and then you did DBT with
Yes.
dialectical living?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I also had some like supplementary counseling sessions with someone via like telehealth in my local area, but who also was versed in DBT. So that was helpful to kind of as a reinforcement. But yes, I actually did try like a psychoanalysis or more kind of freer form psychotherapy, and I personally did not find it very effective. So finding the different things work for different people. But DBT, what I liked it is I like school. So DBT, again, the psychoeducational aspect. These are solid things that I can put into place. I can apply this to this, and this is the framework that I can use for that. It really helped me. And yeah, it felt more like going to school. I'm like, school, I can do school. Like, okay, I got this. I got it. You know what I mean? And it contextualized it for me, which I found really helpful.
That's great because it's within a group, and so it did kind of mimic the school-like environment.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And what were some of the skills? Like, what was your take from DBT in comparison to CBT?
CBT, okay, I found like CBT, it was missing like the glue. You know what I mean? Like the glue was like really kind of the mindfulness piece, which it's somewhat in CBT, but it's way more emphasized in DBT. And also the like kind of the taking into the mind the emotional landscape. Like CBT is very like thought behavior based, but then there's this whole other kind of element that it misses. So DBT just really helped that stick together. And in terms of DBT skills, there's so many that I love. For me, one of the best is check the facts, because I feel like my emotions can really distort the facts of a situation. And yeah, so that is definitely one of my favorites. I consider it like a really good base skill. Because the difference between facts, feelings, and emotions and opinions, facts, feelings, and opinions is just a really key starting place to know what skills to use from there. I also love willing hands and half smile. I will confess, I thought it was kind of silly. And, I didn't have a whole lot of faith in it, but I started doing it, and I kind of like Pavlov, like classic conditioned myself into, responding to that. Like if it's something I really don't want to do. I even did it this morning for something as mundane as like, you know what, I need to get back into working out. Haven't worked out for a couple of weeks. I really don't want to do this, things like that. And it can help you throughout your day. And and of course, distress tolerance, and the two that I do find helpful that I need to work on are kind of the idea of turning the mind and radical acceptance. But I just see so much potential for that in my life.
Can you give us an example of check the facts?
Okay, so so say for example, like I have a pretty difficult coworker, let's say, and let's call him Bob. So he's always kind of, like an example that someone could use is that Bob will kind of, he will, question what I say, or he'll dismiss my idea and all this. And I make it so personal, right? Like, I'm like, oh, he must be thinking this. He thinks this because of this. And then it's like, well, no, you need to check the facts. We have different ideas on how to approach this project. These are his ideas. These are my ideas. It's like, okay, so what is my opinion about this? My opinion is that he's really annoying. I feel like he's undermining me. I feel like he's invalidating me. He's really annoying and unprofessional sometimes, and I don't like him on some level, but that's an opinion, right? So it's the fact is kind of we're trying to work together to find an approach to something. Again, not a super nuanced detail, but nuanced example, but that's kind of something that you can unpick from each other. And the one thing about check the facts is it helps me, and I think this kind of goes into a couple other skills too, is determine whether my reaction or my course of action is going to be effective for what I'm dealing with at that time.
Yeah, great example. So it sounds like you're looking into the distortions, you're recognizing that distortion of personalizing, and then you're checking the facts.
Yeah, and I'm catastrophizing like, oh, well, what
Okay.
if like, you know, this doesn't work, or like he doesn't
Yeah.
like me, and then we have like this war of attrition, and we have different ideas, and like it's bad for our business or whatever. You know, it again, it's the catastrophizing, personalization, all these things, and then yeah, so checking the facts is really the biggest one for me. But there's so many great ones, and ones that I want to use more too. So because it's like always. DBT is very robust, so it's always like it's meaty, so it's like always kind of adding on and deepening your knowledge of those skills.
But you would say that you're using the skills all the time.
Oh yeah, all the time. Like you know, as I was saying in my kind of bio thing, or you mentioned in the bio thing, I do love evangelizing about it. I might be somewhat cult-like about DBT, you know, and I just see people in my life, and again, maybe not the best way to you know, it can be kind of invalidating and be like, you should really try this, you know what I mean? But to people who maybe aren't ready for that, but I have really advocated for it for people in my life, especially people who might struggle with some similar issues, or who are anyone really. Like, you know, my brother's a teacher, he works with kids. I was like, you know, that would be something great for you to do, because then you could really use it in your classroom. Honestly, DBT is good for like any human, like period, right? So
What would you say about, so you've got a strong relationship with your partner. Have they used DBT, and how has that worked within your relationship?
oh yeah, so he has been really like open to the ideas, and it's funny because sometimes a lot of the advice that he would give me before would be kind of very DBT based. He's a very kind of opposite person to me, but like in a good complementary way, and he's very you know, reserved and self-possessed, and you know, obviously he has his struggles as well, but you know, a lot of the advice that he would give me in the past, it kind of lined up with a lot of DBT skills. So it was kind of a natural transition, and he kind of like has learned some of the skills along with me, which is really helpful. Sometimes I'll learn something from DBT. He's like, well, that's like something I always say. And I'm like, okay, but I needed something else to make it sink in. Like, you know, I needed like context for it. But yeah, and you know, he's a person who struggles with a chronic illness, so like radical acceptance has been a huge thing in his life, and I think he in the future would kind of like to explore it a bit more, just because again, it's a really great thing for anyone, but also for people supporting people with emotional dysregulation, for sure.
Yeah, it's exactly what Amanda said at the beginning of this webinar. It's for everyone. It's a life skill.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, we really should teach it kind of in schools. Like, you know, I think it's something that has so much potential, much potential.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Allison.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really happy to. Like, there's so much stigma around BPD, and I'm a person who like meets some of the criteria, some not, but like a lot of the criteria, yes. So it's really important for me to talk about this, and yeah, hopefully it can be helpful for other people who are struggling or living with BPD, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We do have some questions.
Sure.
And some comments. I'm just so pleased with all the great feedback I've reading in the chat. I just want to thank you, everyone who's put some great feedback in the chat about how they're in awe. So someone had written just how in awe they were of everyone here for being vulnerable, for sharing. And so I wanted to share that before I forgot. The question is, what is willing hands and half smile?
Oh, do you want me to, I can definitely talk about it. I'm sure Julie and Isabella, obviously, they taught me everything I know. No,
that's for you,
I am their
Allison.
Padawan. They're my, no, wait, what is it? I forget. I haven't seen Star Wars in a while. That reference just, but here's the thing. Willing hands is kind of, again, I believe it comes from, as Marsha Linehan says, it comes from Zen Buddhism, and it somewhat, and it's the idea of just like putting your hands like this. And it's sort of for you, like if you're having trouble, like if you're struggling with something emotionally, or you're struggling with impulses in particular, like an impulse to use or indulge in a substance or something like that, you kind of are like, okay, well, I need to go up and I need to distract myself. It's like, but I don't want to. I don't want to. My brain is stuck on this. And then you use the willing hands as kind of, again, that Pavlov thing to kind of hack your brain, I feel, in a way, to sort of kind of be like, okay, I'm going to commit to doing this. I'm going to commit to going forward with something that my brain is telling me the opposite. So yeah, and half smile is kind of like, if you're really struggling with, especially for me, anger or like kind of a bitterness or resentment, that's where I find the half smile is really effective, right? Because it kind of like, for me, maybe this isn't the way it's supposed to work, but I feel like kind of stupid doing it. And then I laugh, like I'm just like smiling beatifically, like in my office by myself. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So, but it kind of does help, right?
Yeah, it tricks your mind.
Yeah, and also it's like,
Yeah.
I believe, like, as you're saying, Isabel, it tricks your mind because it, the endorphins of smiling. Yeah, or sometimes people do laughing. I did do laughing yoga. It wasn't my thing personally, but it was in a very loud room and it was very echoey, so maybe that's but it's all these kind of fun things to sort of hack your brain and kind of get you in that better place.
It helps to reinforce turning the mind.
Yes, totally, 100%.
Julie, was there another question?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I thought were really amazing that Allison had mentioned. And it came up in terms of the differences between CBT and DBT. And I love when I get this question, and you did such a great job of answering it. And also too, you had mentioned about, psychoanalysis, those types of therapies that, were way back in the days, not that long after Freud, I think, and where that type of therapy started. And there's actually been studies done to show that this sort of psychoanalytic actually is more harmful to people who struggle with BPD or emotion dysregulation. Because if you can imagine someone who's sort of predisposed to sitting in their thoughts and having them go over and around and around and around without being able to sort of get off, and to come into a therapy session where you lay on a couch or you just sort of freeform the whole time, then it's like you continue to sit in those intense emotions, and then you leave the session feeling worse than you did when you came in. So
100%.
that's your type of therapy. And I've spoken to clients who've sort of been, and of course, DBT is very much, as was mentioned, around it being structured. It's like, it's very practical. Here's skills you can use. And so I think it's such a good question that came up in terms of the different types of therapy that you'd mentioned. And CBT, as we know, is all about cognition or thinking, right? So it's when we're using the thinking part of our brain is when we're in a calmer place. So we know what happens when our brain is on stress, and this happens to everyone, not just those who have BPD or emotion dysregulation or mental health in general. When the stress is really high, that part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, just disconnects from the amygdala. So cognitive behavior therapy sort of assumes that you have that thinking part of your brain sort of connected so that you can do CBT. So I often tell people that CBT is a great therapy. It is thought records and acknowledging distortions kind of thing, and doing DBT first. It can be super helpful if you are someone who struggles with BPD or emotion dysregulation, so that you can learn how to reduce the intensity on your emotions before you're able to really sit down and think and process through things.
100%. There's one thing I just briefly wanted to mention about why I love DBT. If we have a second for it, is I just really love the idea, and this is what I found different in my particular experience of CBT, though I don't think this is entirely typical, but is the relationship between the clinician or the therapist and the patient, or the person learning, because it's way more authentic than other therapy modalities I found. Because obviously there's like there's boundaries and a sense of professionalism, of course, but like you're allowed to, like Julie, Isabel, as clinicians, you're allowed to be vulnerable and be honest and candid about your struggles, and that kind of authenticity, radical genuineness, is really, really something that resonated with me, because I actually had an experience with a clinician who was very strange about that, and was like, one time I asked her how her day was going, and she's like, you can't ask me that, that's not professional. And I'm like, okay, that's a little much, and it was kind of alienating. So it's nice to sort of have that rapport.
Yeah, that's like in the video that we show where it says, in DBT, your therapist is more likely to tell you when you ask them what they're doing Saturday night, actually what they're doing, as opposed to, well, let's talk about why you've asked that question. So
Yeah.
it's very true that DBT is very much a different type of therapy. And I want to mention there's a few really good things here in the chat. So yes, absolutely. You know, the therapists and are all different. And of course, you know, the biggest predictor of success in therapy is hope and sort of inspiration and hope and connection. So if you have those things with your therapist, it often, you know, can be more important than the type of therapy sometimes if you have that with a therapist. So I think it's important to recognize that those are the things to look for. If you have hope and you're connected, those two things are super important in a therapeutic relationship. Thank you for that comment in the chat. And just to answer one more question, then we'll move on to a few other things before we finish. There's the video compilation will be on YouTube, on the Dialectical Living YouTube channel. There will be links to the recording for this as well as the compilation video on the website in the next couple of days.
Great.
So I believe
So
that
thank you.
the rest of the questions. Sorry, go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah. Oh, no. So I guess that's the end of the Q&A period there. Well, we can have some questions later on. We are almost short of time. Allison, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience, specifically with DBT. With that being said, we are going to turn it over to Julie now, who's going to talk about everything DBT. Thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking today. I appreciate it.
So what I'd love to talk about a few things, and there's been some questions come up, so I want to make sure that I answer them. I wanted to mention a little bit about some of the things that we have coming up. It was mentioned around whether or not we're doing an addiction workshop. Yes, we are, and I'm so pleased. Thank you to the person who brought that up. We're actually doing a workshop on June 5th and 6th. It's called Addiction in Difficult Times. So I'm really hoping people will come out. It's a two-day weekend. 3 hours each day, so it's 10 to 1, and you can find this on the website to sign up for. We're also doing a addiction for families. So if you have family members who really want to better understand what addiction is and have more compassion and understanding for their loved ones with addiction, we're having a family workshop on the Wednesday, June 9th, and that's a 3-hour workshop in the evening. Some of the other things just to put out there, I know that it was mentioned, I need to bring up the free group that we have on Fridays. So on Friday, we have a free group called Coping with COVID Using DBT Skills. And this is a group, and this is important, it's a group for people who've already done some DBT. So within the last 2 years and are familiar with the skills, because we support each other with skills use. So that group requires that you know some DBT. And our core program, of course, is a 12 or 24 week program. The next one starts on June 2nd, which is an afternoon, 1 to 3 p.m. We're very proud of our School of DBT. Actually, we've been doing something a little unique and different. And what's really great is that it's meeting the needs for people with BPD or DBT for all budgets. Because as we know, DBT can be super expensive. And one of the things that Dialectical Living does is to the best of our ability to make sure that DBT is accessible and in many ways, including financially. So our School of DBT offers several courses that are on demand, sort of do at your own pace, including one called DBT Foundations, which is great for anyone who's done some DBT in the past who'd just like to refresh and go through learning all of the skills. And it's a course that's interactive, and we make it fun with video and quizzes and reflections and things like that. So you can find those off the website under School of DBT. We just finished running a DBT for couples program, which was very popular. We called it Loved Ones and Their Supporters. So it's not very often you find in DBT a program where you can bring your loved one along with you and learn DBT together with them. So it was very, very successful at the end, and we're hoping to run more programs. So if you're out there and you're either a family member or someone who struggles with BPD or emotion dysregulation, we now have a program where the two of you could come and learn DBT together. So I believe, the family program we run is called Compassion in Chaos, which runs every Monday night, and that is a pay-as-you-go. So families can come and we keep it very compassionate. Of course, that's really my my focus when I'm teaching families, is to make sure that it always comes back to compassion. So that's the Compassion in Chaos group on Mondays. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and this came up and a few people have asked questions. So we do have This is the skills reminder booklet that we've published. This is on Amazon. It has been out for about a year. This one, we just got the final proof, which because of COVID took about 2 months to get. So provided it has no typos, no errors, it will be published literally early this week. So if it is, you'll know that everything was good with the proof. It will be available by end of week next week on Amazon. Hopefully. So these two books have been years in the making, and we're very excited to put them out there for you to help you remember and remind you of your skills, something that you can do from home to really remember. Because, you know, DBT is really like a lifestyle, right? It's a seed, it's a lifestyle. One course at some point isn't going to be all that one takes. You need to have refreshers every couple of years, stay connected with community, and maybe find some good books to read. There are several out there that are good. So really sort of staying connected with the DBT community. And of course, once you've done DBT, that group that runs Fridays from 1 to 2 is pretty indefinite. I think we'll likely continue on and on and on with this group on Fridays. So once you've taken a group, you can come join us. It doesn't have to be a group with Dialectical Living. If you've taken a group with Stella's Place or any other place, as long as it's been at least 12 weeks in a recognized DBT organization, then you're welcome to come and join us. You can sign up for that on the website. So DBT, and just quickly, I wanted to talk on opportunities. The opportunities are just endless out there, and COVID over the last weeks has brought so many opportunities. I've actually been asked to work with an organization doing mental health workshops for people who have loved ones in India, and so teams in India, and teaching the DBT skills to help them to deal with some of the crisis and the things that are going on right now. And of course, you know, our thoughts go out to India and the challenges that they're having, and of course supporting people around the world who are struggling. And of course, we know that DBT skills and modified in some ways could be super helpful for dealing with COVID. So also grade 11 students, I'm so pleased to be able to, and thank you to the person who brought me in. I will be helping to teach grade 11 students at the end of May communication skills based on the Dear Man Fast Give set of DBT skills. So there's plenty of opportunities starting. People are really getting to know DBT and wanting to you know, bring it into corporations, which is a whole, you know, thing I'm very excited about, given my corporate background. And of course, high schools, it's come up a few times about, you know, teaching DBT in schools and how important it is to teach, you know, kids young how to use these skills so that they know how to communicate better with their families, and you know, how to deal with distress, how to build a distress tolerance box, you know, how to do pros and cons lists and check the facts, and all the skills that have come up throughout all the speakers. I'm so pleased that all of you really know your stuff. So I'd like to really thank everyone. I'd like to thank Emily. Emily is here, and she also put in some work in terms of helping with this webinar. And I just like to make sure to send a thank you out to her, as she is a new person who's joined Dialectical Living, and she's helping with communications, and she's been very helpful with this webinar. So thank you so much, Emily. I'd like to thank others who indirectly contributed to this webinar. It wouldn't have come together without all of the people who helped even inspire it from the background. You know, anyone who mentioned they wanted to be a speaker, the first few really inspired us to set a date and make it happen. So I want to thank each and every speaker and each and every person who sent a video and picked for the compilation, which all of will be posted. The recording for this webinar will be available on the site, as well as the compilation. I believe I had mentioned that. And so I just wanted my final thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming out to this webinar. Thank you so much for helping us to reduce stigma. You know, we need to get the word out and, you know, dispel these myths, because there's some terrible myths out there. And if we can help educate people in ways that people really listen, then I think that, you know, with slow progress, as with most of the things around mental health and diagnosis, etc., that we can make, you know, we can make to help. I mean, there's been lots of progression around mental health. If we just think about it, even not that long ago, there was, you know, the concept of the asylum, and that you were, you know, again, that concept, you're the sick or you're not. And of course, we don't look at mental health, and I certainly don't look at mental health like that. Again, talking about what we talked about earlier in the continuum. So final thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm hoping we'll do another one, right, Isabel? We're going to do another one next year. Celebrate May BPD month again next year. I think
absolutely. Yes.
Yes. So we see you hopefully before that. Hopefully you'll join us for something in the coming weeks, and we'd love to see you. We do have coloring book workshops some nights, free events where we just get together virtually and share. So if you're not on our mailing list, you can get on the mailing list off the main page, and then you'll find out about all the things we're up to. Thank you everyone for coming out.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Stay dialectic.